So today we're back working on this 2009 Chevy Duramax and the Allison automatic transmission, and this is part 3 of a video series. So today we're going to replace this internal mode switch, which is also referred to as a neutral safety switch or manual lever position sensor. There's the part number 295-42692. I actually got it from the dealer. It was cheaper from the dealer than the aftermarket, plus it was also in stock. As you might recall from the previous video, this vehicle, the shift indicator does not indicate drive when it's in drive, and on the scan data it shows as invalid data. So we're going to put it up in the air, drain the transmission fluid. We're going to do a tranny service when we're in there just to be on the safe side. Hopefully we don't find a lot of metal filings or anything bad inside the transmission, but we'll see what it looks like when we get in there. So I'm going to try drain the fluid out of the transmission pan before I remove it. Fortunately, this doesn't require removal of a cross member or dropping exhaust to remove the trans pan. This looks like it's got the deep pan on it, but I'm not sure. There were 2 filter kits available. And we're going to change the spin-on filter while we're at it as well. So we'll pick up when I got the pan off. So I removed the spin-on filter, and there's a permanent magnet around the filter in here. Take that magnet out and wipe it off with a clean rag. Clean off the gasket surface. I've drained the fluid out of it. It doesn't look too bad. It's a little discolored. But we're going to put a new spin-on filter on. There's the filter. 29539579. So there's the inside of the transmission pan. Looks relatively clean. There's no metal debris, no signs of clutch material, which is nice. So we're going to continue here to replace this switch, which is up inside here, right here. Let's grab the light so we can see a little better. So this is the manual switch right here. To replace it, the shift shaft has to come out, but the valve body has to come off first. So we're going to have a look at which exact bolts we need to remove. Obviously the filter has to come off, and we'll pick up when we get the valve body off. So here's the procedure to remove the control valve body. It says disconnect the external harness, as you can see over here, and using a 1 3/16 12-point box end wrench, push in on the connector to push the connector through the retainer into the transmission case. I guess the wiring harness is going to stay with the valve body rather than disconnecting all of the leads and all of the connectors from all of the solenoids. Remove the 2 detent spring bolts, so that's the shift detent, and then all of these bolts that are highlighted in with black dots. So you don't have to remove all of them, obviously, so we'll have to pay close attention to that. I don't think there's any check balls we need to be concerned about above the valve body that could fall out and get lost, and doesn't mention anything about check balls like they used to use on some valve bodies. And there's the actual switch that we're going in to replace. Okay, so we'll proceed. I'm going to leave this image up here with this one here, so I can refer to that. So there's the connector on the back of the transmission that we need to press out, and all these little lock tabs have to be simultaneously pressed. It says to use a 1 3/16 box end wrench. I don't have one. I have 1 1/8 and 1 1/4, but I do have a 1 3/16 12-point 3/4 inch drive socket, so I'm going to try that and see if that will work. I hope it's deep enough. We'll see what happens. So the 1 3/16 3/4 inch drive socket worked. Put an extension on it, tapped it from the back. It compressed all the retaining clips, and it pushed the sensor or the connector in. So now we're ready to drop the valve body. So there's the valve body off. There is one tricky little part here. There's a little manual valve here with a pin in it that has to intersect with that switch in this groove up here, and it fell out into the bottom of the pan here when I was taking it off. That's why I put this drain pan here, so that it would catch anything that might have fallen off. So this manual lever pin here has to be reinstalled in the correct orientation, something like that, before it's reinstalled in the valve body. Now I'm not sure if it was upside down or right side up, but we'll figure it out. There is the switch we're going after. Now we have to remove that bolt there and the nut on the end of the lever, and hopefully the shaft is going to come out of here and we'll be able to change that switch. So there's a pin that needs to be removed from the case. Clamp a small pair of vice grips on it and use a prying tool to pry the pin out, pull it straight down. That pin retains the shaft in the case. There it is there. I don't know if that camera is going to pick it up. Don't try and twist it because it has ridges on it. Just pull it straight down. And then there's a T20 bolt that retains the shaft to the actual gear. I'm hoping this is going to clear the... Oh, look at that. It does clear. Now the parking pawl disengages, if I'm not mistaken, by turning it. Not sure which way. I guess I can just pull it out like that. Alright. So there we have it. All that work just to get at that switch. It was a lot nicer when it was on the outside. So there's the new part installed. Make sure that it goes into reverse, or into the parking pawl clicks in place, and I can hear it clicking in. Tap that pin back straight up with a small hammer, and there is an index for this switch, because the switch has to sit about like that. So we had the transmission in park when we were taking it apart, so we got to put it back together in that same orientation. Next, I got to figure out which way that manual valve on the valve body goes, up or down. So the main spool valve, selector valve, goes with the notch up. The pin slides in and it slides into the case. So it can't fall out of there easily unless you pull it past this plastic nib here. So that has to be interfaced with this slot in the manual lever here when it goes back into the transmission. We're going to wipe off these gasket surfaces here and wipe off the surfaces on the transmission and then reinstall it. So I ran across a peculiar problem after I installed this valve body. I put it back up and I noticed that there was a bolt to go in here, but I couldn't find the bolt. So then I started looking inside there. I went to put a bolt in there and I remembered I never took that bolt out. Now it should be a 2-inch long bolt. So I looked down in there with the borescope, and lo and behold, the bolt's broken off. So I took the valve body back off the truck again, and I managed to use a drill to drill it through from the top. I just drilled into it and it just threaded right out. So that bolt's been broken off in there. Remember, I said this was a reman transmission, so I'm going to have to see if I can find a 6mm bolt about the same length. Well, that's just fun. So there are 9 bolts in total. There's 4 longer ones, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 more in the front here, 5. And then 4 more in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 9 and 6 is 15. 6 in the back. And I'm short, actually, 2 bolts. So that means there was a bolt missing in one of the other locations back here. I didn't remember taking this one out, and I put it in loosely. So there's obviously been some hocus pocus going on with this thing. I have to see if I can find a couple of these length bolts now. So I managed to find 3 bolts, 6mm bolts, the right length. A couple of them I had to shorten slightly. They got 10mm heads instead of 8mm heads. I was actually missing 3 bolts, and 1 bolt was broken off in the valve body. That's why when I was putting them in, I was like, where's all the bolts? How could I be missing bolts? Anyways, nevertheless, I found 3 bolts, and I'm ready to reinstall the valve body a second time now. I've got
15 bolts left to go in, 9 short ones, or 11 short ones and 4 long ones. The 4 long ones go in these corners, 5 in the front and 6 in the back. So take 2. So take 2 didn't work out very well either. There's 2 broken bolts in the transmission itself, as you can see here. I did not break those off. Those were the ones that were missing. That's why I was having difficulty locating the bolts. I was taking out extra bolts. My goodness sakes. So I managed to back those broken studs, or those broken bolts out. There's 1. And 2. That's why I was missing 3 bolts when I was putting it back together again. So, take 3. Let's put it back together again. So you know what they say, a third time's a charm. So now we're going to tighten up all the bolts to 108 inch-pounds with my brand new snap-on torque wrench. There's 1. 2. 3. Oh, I missed 2. There's 1 here. 1 here. And 1 here. We'll spin them in gently with the electric. Okay, that one. That one. That one. Alright, let's socket. Let's start again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, that one wasn't one of them. 7, 8, and see this one here. And this one here. Now, who would put a transmission together, break off 3 bolts, and then leave it like that? That was one of the other ones. I'm going to double check all of them. Those are the 2 that I replaced. Let's start in the corner here and make sure we got them all. Let me check them all. So I'm going to turn the key on here and see if this shift indicator works now. Indicates park, reverse, neutral. Oh, beautiful. Indicates drive, manual, and low. Okay, so we'll put the pan and filter and everything back together down there and fill it up and go for a road test. So there are 2 filter kits. This one turned out to be the short filter. Make sure that the O-ring seal has come out of there when you go to put the new filter in. Put some transmission fluid on the seal and tap it in. If you put the short filter in the deep pan, it would have a tendency to fall out because it's about a ½ an inch longer. And of course the long filter we wouldn't be able to put the pan on. But the distance from this lip to the top of the filter on the short one is 4 inches, on the long one is 4.5. So I've got it back together and running. I cleared the codes from the transmission computer, added 12 liters of fluid to the 12 quarts to the pan so far, as I took out about 12 to 14 in a 5-gallon pail. I'm going to go through the shift points now We'll see how it reacts over here on the transmission range switch. I know it's working. So as you can see now, it hasn't indicated invalid at any time. Now we know the position of the 4 switches inside the range sensor as it goes through the shifts. So I'll save that for future reference. So I just came back from a road test. Transmission shifts beautiful, no more harsh 2-to-1 downshift. I suspect the invalid gear shift indicator was the cause of that. Check the transmission fluid, and it's between about a 1/4 inch from the top of the hot mark, and the tranny's not fully up to temperature, I'm sure. You've got to work this thing to get it up to temperature. I'm just going to see if there's any codes in the transmission. Yay, no codes. Now, a couple days ago I drove this to the village, and it set a fault code for the brake switch in the PCM. Invalid brake switch input. So I'm going to look and see if that code's come back. No, it hasn't. So if that code for the brake switch returns, we'll have to address that. Sometimes the brake pedal switch, which has 2 switches in it, will argue with each other. Should be in this data list here. Brake pedal switch, brake pedal signal, and PCC brake switch. So when I apply and release the brake, they should both indicate applied. Well, that seems to be working fine right now, but it is common for them to fail, and if they argue with each other, it sets a fault code. I can't remember the exact fault code. I'll see if I can find it. So we'll call this one a wrap.